I am Dr. Ray Dykes, and this is the Personal Faith Program. This is a series of podcasts on personal faith with a passion, how to know what you really believe. If you would like to get serious about this study and do some work, there's a workbook in the book Personal Faith with a Passion, which you can order at paradoxpress.com. It's $10. Paradocs.com. Paradoxpress.com. This next several podcasts are about mixing clay and straw to mold belief bricks, mixing experience with religious information to mold belief bricks, and understanding how belief bricks relate to daily experiences. Once you've begun to make belief bricks and construct your spiritual house of faith, it's exciting to see how faith works in practical matters. Practical issues must be dealt with day by day, and there should be integrity between what you believe and how you deal with these issues. In the last series of podcasts, we dealt with the difficult topics of the Bible, Jesus, Holy Spirit, Trinity, and the will of God. That's tough and very important doctrinal faith. This section is about practical faith with a little bit of the heady stuff mixed in. The issue at hand is application of belief to daily life. How and when and where the rubber meets the road. You probably think about some of these issues on a daily basis. Abortion, stem cell research, suicide, capital punishment, right and wrong, good and evil, war and peace, salvation, afterlife. These are massive issues we all confront as human beings. There should be integrity in your faith about these matters. You can have a reasoned argument for your position on these various matters because they're all primarily matters of faith. For example, the abortion issue hinges on what you believe about the beginning of human life, conception or birth. The reason you may disagree with another person on these matters is that your clay is different and you may not have access to the same straw. Tolerance is a virtue when discussing tough issues. When I was in divinity school, John Fairweather was a student with me, and we disagreed on everything. We loved each other like brothers. We sometimes cut class to play ping pong. John is a Democrat. I'm a Republican. John is from Iowa. I'm a son of the South. John is a disciple of Christ. I grew up Baptist. John majored in ethics. I was in New Testament studies. John and I argued about everything. We learned to disagree agreeably. And he taught me a great deal because I learned to listen to what he had to say. In order to refute him, I had to listen to him. That was great fun. Tolerance was a virtue. Now let's talk about what is human nature. When someone begins considering the question, who is God, a second question comes quickly. What is human nature? Is human nature evil, good, bad, or neutral? What's the difference between human nature and human activity? The story of Adam, which means human being in Hebrew, and Eve, which means living being, these are symbolic names. In the Garden of Eden, Eden means fertility in Hebrew, is commonly understood to contain the story of the fall of humankind. The story says that God tells the new people not to eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and bad. The devil, aka the serpent, tempts Eve to eat. She eats and gives some to Adam, and they both have disobeyed God, the story says, incurred God's eternal wrath for their sin, and their human nature is sinfully evil and inherited by all humans, and that's the doctrine of original sin. What you believe about human nature in the beginning of human life determines your position on abortion. What you believe about the sanctity of life determines what you believe about capital punishment and war. What you believe about the end of human life determines what you believe about euthanasia and suicide. What you believe about human nature is related to everything that has been said in this book so far, in this series of podcasts. The story of the Garden of Eden is the traditional source of the teaching that human nature is bad or evil. This story has been used to indicate that Adam and Eve sinned by eating the fruit of the forbidden tree, resulting in the fall of humankind, and that human nature has been sinful ever since. This story may not be about human nature changing from good to evil. It may not be a story of original sin. It may be a story about God's giving people a chance to be human beings with opportunities to choose to do both the good and bad. Now, here's an alternative understanding of the creation stories in Genesis. You have a choice. There are two accounts of creation in Genesis. One is actually a description, and one's a story. In both accounts, God created the world. The description in Genesis, in the first chapter of Genesis, says that everything God created was, that after God created everything, God looked around at it and said, it's good. There's no verse in that description where God said, it's bad. Every creature in every part of creation is said to be good. Then in the old story, in Genesis 2 and 3, which is 500 years older than the one in Genesis 1, God created the animals and brought them to Adam for Adam to name. God created all the animals to help and serve Adam, including the serpent. Everything that was created to help Adam. The serpent was created to be a servant to Adam. What does the serpent do? The serpent cannot carry heavy loads like a horse. The serpent cannot help Adam by giving him milk like a cow. What are we told about the serpent to describe his qualities to help Adam? One quality of the serpent is given in most translation as crafty or subtle. The Hebrew word for crafty or subtle is the same word as naked. I've never seen a naked person be subtle. I've never seen a crafty person be naked. The word really means wise. So the verse really says the serpent was wiser than all the other beasts. The serpent also had the ability to speak, which none of the other animals in the garden had. So the serpent could speak, and the serpent was wiser than all the other animals. These are the two gifts the serpent had to help Adam. God created this beautiful garden, and right in the dead center of this garden, he put the tree of the knowledge of good and bad. The story also tells us that next to this tree of the knowledge of good and bad was another tree, the tree of immortality. Then God said to these two 15-minute-old people, don't eat from that tree there. What does that mean in terms of the people God created here, Adam and Eve? They don't know good from bad. Did these people know that it was bad to disobey? No, they didn't know anything was bad. They didn't know that anything was good either. They simply were told not to eat the fruit from the specific tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and bad. What did they do? First of all, Eve had a conversation with the serpent. The serpent said, did God tell you not to eat of that tree? Eve said, yes, that's right. The serpent said, what would happen if you ate from that tree? Eve said, we'll die. The serpent replied truthfully, you won't die, go ahead and eat. Now, what if that was what the serpent was created to do? Otherwise, he was going to have to follow these two people around the rest of their lives and tell them everything that's good and bad because nobody else can talk to them except God. So he said, the serpent, let's cut to the chase. Just eat from the tree. Eat from the tree, for crying out loud. And then you'll know what's good and bad, and I won't have to follow you around the rest of my life. The serpent was created good, it says, for the purpose of helping Adam. Maybe there's some humor here. Maybe this is God saying, I know how to get them to eat from that tree. I'll tell them not to. There's a terrific song from the musical called The Fantastics. Why do the kids put beans in their ears? Children can't hear with beans in their ears. Why do the kids put beans in their ears? They do it 'cause we say no. Why do the kids put jam on the cat? Strawberry jam all over the cat. 'Cause we say no. You know that children never thought about putting jam on the cat till you said don't put jam on the cat. So why in the world would you tell 15-minute-old people don't eat from that tree? So, and why did God put that tree of the knowledge of good and bad right smack in the middle of the garden and then point to it? Why didn't God put it way over there on the edge of the garden and put a briar patch around it? If you don't want somebody to eat from a tree, why don't you hide the tree? Do you see what concept of God you have to buy into if you buy into the concept that this is original sin? It's a concept of God who puts a tree right in the middle of the garden, points to it and says, don't touch that. If you do, I'll have to kill you. What if this is a part of God's great master plan to make sure these people are going to be human beings because they have to know the difference between good and evil before they can have freedom and responsibility, before they can be really human? Because until that time, they're puppets. Does God want puppets, or does God want to be loved freely? If God the puppet master, is God the puppet master who controls people with strings, thus enslaving them and ensuring that people have to love God and obey out of duty and bondage? The next section of the story portrays God's cursing of the serpent and Eve and Adam. Since these verses are written in poetic form and are found in the middle of this prose narrative, many scholars maintain they were placed there by an editor with a particular agenda many centuries later. So if you omit these verses and continue reading the prose narrative, the text says that after God found out that they'd eaten from the tree of the knowledge of good and bad, God gave Adam and Eve clothes. It doesn't say God was angry. God just gave them clothes and said, out you go. God put them out the door, outside the gates of the Garden of Eden, and put a guard there. The story says to keep them from coming back, to keep them away from the tree of immortality. Now, why didn't God tell them in the first place, don't eat from the tree of immortality? He didn't say anything about that tree. Why not? What's the point of the old storyteller who's telling this story? What if this story presents the Garden of Eden as a symbol of childhood and adolescence? What if being cast out of the garden is symbolic of the natural process of moving into adulthood with all its trials and tribulations, but also its freedom and responsibility? Maybe this is not the story of the fall of humankind, nor the basis for the doctrine of original sin. All this dictates your view of the status of human nature. We'll continue this in the next podcast.